Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome back to another edition of After the Buzzer. I am your host, Couper Moorhead, and we are talking about the Miami Heat's 112-86 victory over the Golden State Warriors. There were a ton of storylines, a ton of narratives coming into this one. It's on national television on TNT. You got ESPN doing stand-ups on the court hours before the game. Everyone tuning in to see what will happen when Jimmy Butler makes his return to play in Miami. It all felt a little bit like a playoff game, at least in terms of, pomp and circumstance. You half expected to see the Department of Choreography and Merriment out there before this one. But it turns out, in the end, there was really no drama at all. Maybe some people were tuning in thinking they were going to get an episode of reality television, but what they got was just one of the Heat's best performances of the season, bar none, and it all started with Bam Adebayo. Now, what we like to say about games like this is that the Heat won by as much as they did because of their shooting, which we'll talk about in a moment, but they won outright because of their defense, and that was where Bam came in. Bam started this game taking on the Jimmy Butler assignment from the start. Eric Spoelstra has talked a lot about Bam taking on wings, and now that he's playing big lineups with Khalil Ware, that frees up Bam to take on the other team's best, bigger scorer. Sort of similar in the playoffs last year where he took on Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown at times as a primary defender. And as Bam takes on Jimmy early on, he's also flying around and help defense like he's got a jetpack attached to his back. And you could just feel everybody kind of feeding off what he was bringing to the table. Bam has talked a lot about his adjustments to being a leader, to being in that captain role, to being the guy, that everybody turns to when they need inspiration, when they need answers. And it hasn't always been the easiest thing for him, but whenever we ask him about it, which is his favorite topic, he always brings it back to leading by example, and tonight was the ultimate example of that sort of leadership. And I would like you to hear what Bam had to say when we asked him about that tonight.
Yeah, it was a lot of outside emotion around this game. I'm not gonna say for us because, like I said before, we're scrapping for wins, but it was a lot of outside emotion around it. And to go out there and have that type of performance is just, you give guys a vision, you give guys belief, you want guys to play to a higher level, and they did tonight.
So Bam had a good, solid Bam game, 27 points on 18 shots. But then on top of that, there was the shooting, and the Heat shot historic, like they were on the Fury Road. I can't really put this any more plainly. That was one of the best shooting games at low volume in NBA history. And it might not seem like it. That might not have been the first thing on your mind when you finished watching that game or when you were reading about that game. But in terms of shooting 68% from three or better, they shot 68% tonight, on at least 25 three-point attempts, the Heat were just the seventh team ever to hit those benchmarks in a regular season game in league history. It's not going to happen very often, obviously, but that it's incredibly difficult to overcome that level of shooting efficiency from the three-point line. And some of that comes from just everybody having one of those nights together. Tyler goes 4 of 4. Alec Burks, filling in as a starter, goes 5 of 7 from 3. Bam, 2 of 3. Davion Mitchell, 2 of 2. But I also want to call out something Eric Spoelstra said post-game about Tyler Hero that plays into exactly what we were talking about with him after the last game and against Charlotte, where we spoke about how Tyler has been adjusting to the defensive adjustments he's seen, where teams are pressuring him up. They're trying to limit his airspace beyond the arc. And in previous games, he's taken that pressure, used the driving lanes that it opens up for him, and he's gotten downhill and he's been finishing in the paint. But tonight he used it. He only took 10 shots. He shot 7 of 10, but he used that pressure to open up things for everyone else. Eric Spoelstra praised him after the game for that. He praised him for being unselfish, for setting his teammates up. But I also want you to show you what Tyler Hero said after I asked him about this in the locker room, because I asked him whether or not, did you come into that approach thinking the Warriors were going to defend you like that and that you needed to go off the ball, set screens for everybody else, open up 3-point, opportunities for them? And here's what he said in the locker room.
I forgot they had Gary Payton, and then I heard before the game that he was starting or something, and then I was like, oh yeah, that's right. But he's a great defender. I love competing against him, but just trying to play the game the right way. Not every night I'm going to be able to score 30 or whatever it is. Like, just trying to impact the game in different ways, and the ways I'm getting guarded, trying to learn new ways to be effective.
And of course, you can create the best 3-point looks in the world. You can have the highest shot quality in the world. You can do all the best things, all the great things on offense that every coach wants to see you do in terms of movement of ball and body and all that good stuff. And you're still usually not going to shoot 68% from three, so it's just kind of one of those magical nights in that way. But again, that 68% is why they won by as much as they did. It is not the reason they were in position to win, because the defense from the word go jumped out of the gate, had the Warriors on their heels, had them playing outside their comfort zone, and then the Heat got a cushion from there, and then the 3-point shooting, as the game wore on, just kind of kept the Warriors at bay in double-digit deficits for most of the night. Now, on that defense, I think we need to give the Warriors a little grace here, because they did not have Steph Curry. And as with, we should note that anytime the opposing team does not have their best player, but with Curry, it's a step above just noting it, because when Steph is on the floor, the Warriors have one of the best offenses in the league, over 117 points per 100 possessions. When Steph is off the floor, their efficiency drops to 105.2 per 100, which is the equivalent of the worst offense in the league. And that effect is similar. It has translated, for the most part, since the Jimmy Butler trade over the past month plus. So again, Steph on, it's about a top 5 offense. Steph off, offense drops pretty far. And with no Steph in this game, the Warriors kind of ran into some of the similar spacing issues that the Heat dealt with for the past 5.5 years, which was that when you have Jimmy on the floor and you have Bam on the floor, and most of that time was before Bam was taking threes, then you're going to have spacing issues, and you need to surround them with shooters, with guys who have some gravity. That spacing issue really dominated most decisions when it came to lineups and rotations and building everything out. You got to build around both the strengths of your best players, but also the weaknesses. And in terms of the spacing, the weaknesses bounced off each other a little bit. Now with Jimmy and Draymond together, as potent as they are as a defensive duo, there's a little bit of that spacing issue as well. When you have Steph on the floor, he's got so much gravity. He's the best shooter of all time, that it kind of balances everything out and creates this perfect harmony. But without him, again, the geography on the floor is completely different. And, man, early on in this game, the Heat were laser-like and precise in what they were doing on defense. They were following Bam's lead as far as energy, but they also made a ton of really smart, timely help rotation decisions based off knowing that the Warriors didn't have the best shooter of all time on the floor. So, when Jimmy was trying to attack a mismatch, they wouldn't go out and double as much immediately or send a trap. They did it a couple times, but they waited for him to make a move going towards the middle of the floor into the paint. And when he did, that's when they brought help to him. They collapsed guys, and they collapsed guys not from areas you always expect. You expect guys to come from the weak side box, to come from the elbow. They were bringing help from the top of the arc down. They were bringing help from the strong side corner, where a lot of teams are hesitant to bring help from the strong side corner, because that means the corner three wide open is one pass away. The Heat did not particularly care about that tonight, because they KYP, know your personnel. They knew who was on the other team. And, Jimmy was kicking out, and the Warriors weren't making shots early on. That's kind of how they ended up in a deficit. And then their offense was just kind of gunked up a little bit from there. Jimmy finished with 11 points on 12 shots, and he's not someone who typically finishes with more shots than points. He is an unbelievably efficient player, and tonight was an inefficient night. Now, had the Warriors had a better shooting night themselves, maybe that would have changed a little bit, but they finished 23.7% from three on 38 attempts. So the three-point line was a huge chunk of their offense. They were missing most of those, and there just wasn't enough else with the floor kind of, crowded, the middle of the floor crowded based on how the Heat were bringing their help rotations. And, of course, the Heat also have a bunch of really good defenders. They ran lineups with Bam, Davion Mitchell, Andrew Wiggins, Haywood Highsmith all together, obviously with Bam and Khalil Ware on the floor. So you can switch a little bit, too, with lineups like that. And the result is you get a Warriors game where they just did not have a good enough offensive game because, after the Heat's initial burst of, explosive energy in the first half that got them the initial lead, it kind of wore off a bit in the second half. It became more of a normal game, and you're looking at it like, well, what's their second half offense going to look like? Is their fourth quarter offense is going to be put to the test? What's that going to look like? Well, the Heat just kept making threes, and even though there were some turnover issues, the Warriors have a lot of handsy guys, and they got in the passing lanes. The Heat had a good chunk of turnovers, but the Warriors just could never capitalize on that window that remained cracked open for much of the second half. And a few more threes later, game's pretty much over and done with. So, hey, it's a 2-game winning streak now. We can put that whole losing streak behind us. They've won 2 in a row. They held their position in the Eastern Conference standings. They're still at number 10. Detroit, Orlando won. Atlanta lost narrowly, but, we're still in that 7, 8, 9, 10 jostling for position there. We'll see where that goes. Some important games coming up, including Atlanta very soon. We'll see where all that goes from here. For now, this is really just about one game where the Heat showed what they can do on any given night when they defend, when they hit threes. It doesn't have to be historic level threes. They just have to make enough. And when they do that with the defensive effort and precision that they did tonight behind their leader's example and Bam, they can not just play with just about anybody, but they can beat just about anybody. So that's that winning formula has not changed with them. We'll just see how many times they can do it going forward. For now, I'm Couper Moorhead. This has been After the Buzzer. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you very soon.